Hi, I'm Steven, a BigCommerce developer advocate, and I'm here with Sean Larkin from Fueled.io. And we're going to be doing our kickoff solution series talking about the Fuel for BigCommerce app. So, Sean, you and I met a little while ago, and I got a very energetic video from my senior Katie Husley about what you were building, and it just struck me with just the energy level and like the back end of the future of the e-com industry of handling data that I had to get a chance to talk to you about it. So if you could go into a little bit more about what you're working on and what you're building.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So Fueled is essentially what we call a first-party data platform for e-commerce. So we have a Shopify and BigCommerce app. We started with BigCommerce. We love BigCommerce. There's a lot of cool things we can do with BigCommerce. Essentially what we do is we help merchants capture all of their first-party data. So all of the engagement with their shoppers on their BigCommerce store. On the back end, we record, point of sale orders, refunds, recurring billing, all that type of stuff, as well as all the events in the secondary apps that people use if they're on BigCommerce. So, Yahoo reviews, gorgeous customer support engagement, emails, stuff like that. We capture all of this first-party data and then allow merchants to leverage it to increase their engagement with their customers, provide personalization, understand their customers better, things like that. It's kind of like if you've ever heard of like a customer data platform, so like Segment or mParticle or ETLium, we're in that same space of collecting all of this data. And we actually integrate with Segment and mParticle. We built the app around the requirements of a customer who needed BigCommerce and Segment to talk to each other. We started that project like 2 years ago. And then as we started building more and more of this functionality, we realized that, we have a great product that can support big enterprise customer data platforms, but that also has just tremendous value just on its own. And really what kind of sets us apart from other kind of data pipeline tools on the market is that we're focused on e-commerce. We just have a very strong point of view about how to get data collected and integrated in the BigCommerce space in particular.
Right. Awesome. So with that collection of data, what are like some possible use cases of how that would benefit an e-commerce platform with the way that you are collecting data? And if you could go into a little bit more about the details of, how that is different from, say, the normal person thinking, oh, well, data is just collected, through user interaction and stored in the cloud, and, very high level to hopefully we can get into some more nerdy stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that sounds great. So, the biggest use case honestly, I wish it was the smallest use case, but it's on everybody's mind, particularly this week, is how to get data into Google Analytics 4. So technically speaking, on Friday is our last day with Universal Analytics. It's getting shut down starting on Saturday. Everybody better be ready for Google Analytics 4. So to solve that problem, in November, we launched a Google Analytics 4 connector for BigCommerce. So that's what's here on my screen. You can see it right here. So, this was our starting point. This was us just saying, hey, we want to get out into the market. We want to build software. We want to solve some problems. So this app is currently free. We are going to be monetizing it here very soon. We've got a bunch of additional features and integrations that we're about to roll out. We have actually paying customers on those features now. We can turn them on kind of on our back end. So, we've got a bunch of BigCommerce customers that are paying for advanced solutions built off this same app. But for now, we just have this app to say, hey, community, start collecting data in Google Analytics 4, get to know Fueled, and then we can kind of go from there. So we launched this. We have about 100 BigCommerce stores on this app. We have the same app in the Shopify ecosystem as well. again, we really started with BigCommerce because of our partnership there. And because the merchants really just fit with what we're trying to do really, really well. So, but yeah, we launched this. Here's a quick tour of the user interface. It's really simple. Essentially, you install our app, you give us, your Google Analytics measurement ID, you give us an API key, and you're done. We handle all of the setup of all of the different e-commerce events that you might want to track, things like that. We provide a lot of flexibility, and actually in our paid launch that we're going to have, there's even more flexibility. But we give you flexibility over like, hey, do I want to track orders into Google Analytics 4 using the total price that includes shipping and taxes, or just the subtotal? Subtotal is what's recommended, but we do find merchants that for universal analytics, they just set up total price, including all the taxes and shipping. And then in migrating to Google Analytics 4, they don't want to lose that ability, so we give you some flexibility there. We've got some flexibility in terms of, what do you want to send across as the order ID? By default, we send a hashed version of the order ID. That's a nerdy way of saying that we kind of encrypt the order ID. Because in a lot of states, order IDs are kind of considered PII. So we want to help merchants kind of stay privacy forward, privacy centric. We have other merchants that are like, you know what, we just really need the order ID in Google Analytics for X, Y, and Z reasons. So again, just providing flexibility here. BigCommerce has its own native GA4 integration, which is really solid, but it's kind of like you check a box to turn that on. And then, which is awesome. You just check a box and it works. But, we do find that merchants that really, really want to pay attention to Google Analytics want more control, so that's what we have here. And, what's awesome as we start to add different destinations where you can send all of this data. So we have a Google Ads integration for doing enhanced conversion tracking, a Facebook Pixel conversion API integration. We're about to launch a TikTok integration. Again, I mentioned we integrate with Segment and Particle, all these big customer data platforms. Mm-hmm. It's the exact same pixel that you install in your site. So you install Fueled once for BigCommerce. And then again, when we launch all these self-service additional features and destinations, like suddenly now, you have one pixel, it's always capturing the same data. And then you can be, confident that it's going to send the same data, the same events to all those different places that you might need it. So it's just a pretty incredible set of pipes. And then, one of the things that I'm excited to talk to you here about is kind of what's next for us, which is a lot of analytics features and tools to actually start sending this data to a data warehouse and really take control and own all of your own data. But at a high level, Stephen, does that make sense about what we do?
Yeah, that was great. And I mean, you just brought us up into our next question, which is, what is next?
Yeah, so it's really all about allowing merchants to own their data and start analyzing it and activating it in really interesting ways. So, it's an interesting thing building an app like this. There's a lot of companies out there that have reporting tools or data activation tools, segmentation tools, and things like that for BigCommerce, for other e-commerce platforms. The companies just kind of race ahead to do that work. And we're getting there. But we really wanted to make sure that like on day one, we had incredible pipes. I kind of refer to what we're doing as like a kitchen remodel in terms of helping e-commerce brands become more data centric. And it's really easy to like go into a cabinetry store and get really excited about the kitchen cabinets and tile and all that kind of stuff for your kitchen, and kind of forget about your water pipes and your gas lines and things like that. And so what we've built so far, I kind of joke, is like, these are just like the absolute best pipes you could have running into that kitchen remodel, like incredible water pressure, everything just is super, super bomber under the floor, which no one can really see. Marketers tend to want to see the reports and the graphs and the charts first.
Right.
and that's really important. But as an engineer, having done this stuff for 18 years, like I've adopted flashy tools all the time where the underlying tooling, the underlying infrastructure just isn't quite there yet, And so we started with just awesome pipes, allowing merchants to be able to send this data predictably to all these different destinations. And then what comes next is actually the part that I'm most excited about, which is allowing merchants to really own and activate all of this data. So this is going to, bear with me, Stephen, hold me back if I'm being too nerdy. This right here,
that's what people are here for. They want the
the
all
nerds.
the juice, all the nerdiness.
Yeah. So one of the coolest things that we can do is we can help merchants pipe their e-commerce data, all of that event data, into a data warehouse. A lot of people, a lot of marketers tend to just kind of trust like Google Analytics or Facebook or whatever reporting tool that they have. And they know that the data is kind of getting processed weird, but there's no alternative, right? I guess there are some alternatives. You have like Northbeam and some other kind of analytics platforms that work with BigCommerce that you can install them, and they state that they have like an objective, trustworthy algorithm to understand customer, order attribution and things like that. And don't get me wrong, like Northbeam is an incredible product. Some of the machine learning stuff they're doing is just blows my mind. But that's still like another data silo. If you go with like a Northbeam or some other reporting tool in the BigCommerce space, they're just another place that owns your data, and what's interesting too is like if you're going to go with a reporting tool like that, you install it, you still have to install your Google Analytics integration. You still have to install your Google Ads integrations all separately.
Mm-hmm.
So again, with us, incredible pipes, you just install our pixel. We handle all those different destinations, and now we allow you to actually send all this data to a data warehouse. And that opens the door to do some really awesome things. So everything, once it hits the data warehouse for us, is open source. And that to me is an incredible value proposition, and aligns really, really well with BigCommerce being focused as an open SaaS product. Like our pipes are proprietary. The reality is like there's some other companies that have tried to really open source pipes, not for e-commerce, but for other solutions. And we leverage a lot of that open source, but what I found is like to run your own data pipes and infrastructure, unless you're a company doing over 200 million a year in revenue, like you're probably not going to want to invest in a DevOps person that can set up all this stuff on their own. Like it's just really complex. And then applying those pipes and all the data collection to e-commerce, like it just takes a lot of very, very specific experience that we have that I just don't think, even if we gave away how to do all this stuff, it's just not useful. But once the data hits a data warehouse, this is what's exciting, because my core belief is that any company that has access to somebody that knows a little JavaScript and a little bit of SQL, just like a little bit, should really be able to start working with this data on their own. And that's why we're open sourcing all of this. We will be providing full service, like just like swipe a credit card. Here's the Fueled Analytics UI. And I think that we can add some really interesting business intelligence just because we've been doing this so long. But at the core, it's how do we get this data into a place where people on BigCommerce can actually use this data and understand what's going on. So the core of that is, we pipe all the data to a warehouse, and then there's two open source frameworks that we're leveraging and to start activating all of this data. And the first one is this product here. It's DBT, Data Build Tool. I think in e-commerce, it's like probably one of the least appreciated but most powerful tools in e-commerce on the market. It's open source. This is their hosted version, their cloud version. But what DBT is, Data Build Tool, is it's a lightweight kind of Python-based scripting language for being able to generate and compile very complex SQL queries. So, if you are somebody who's done a lot of SQL work, or you've done, you have somebody in your team that does a lot of SQL work, that like sometimes like building really advanced SQL queries, you can end up with just thousands and thousands of lines of SQL. It's
Right.
really hard to document that code. It's really hard to examine specific steps in that code. And so what DBT does is it just gives you a pretty human readable solution for being able to write these queries,
Mhm.
combine queries, do little snippets and things like that to really work with your data. Does that make sense to you, Stephen?
Yeah. I mean, I've done some work in the past with, very large databases, SQL databases, and read some Python scripts, and kind of had to like convert it all into like a wrapper of
Yeah.
like a tool like Atom or something like that, where it was like in order just to get all that data to like move, and it was still not at like the pace when we clocked it for of like high data usage. It was still move incredibly at like a snail speed. So is this like something that is like next level beyond?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like DBT, and it's kind of, everybody has an opinion on this stuff, but DBT is kind of, if this is going to date me here, DBT is kind of revolutionizing the way that people can do analytics and data engineering work, the way that like PHP revolutionized web programming, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, like I would say SQL is kind of like writing SQL is like writing, I'm not going to say machine code, but it's a pretty low level kind of thing.
Right.
What this does is, it really, like this, this is what we call kind of a lineage chart. It's saying like, hey, for this function here, this SQL query that I'm writing right here, like what database tables are being used to generate this final table here. So it's like really well kind of self-documenting. One of the other things that you can do with DBT that's just absolutely amazing, and that I'm so excited to work with BigCommerce on because of like your native BigQuery integration, is, it's self-documenting. So, it's nerdy, but like every single column that we generate, we document what it is. And then that allows us to actually, there's some tools that allow us to kind of turn that into human readable documentation. So this is the documentation of the project that I was just showing, so I can see, in my orders table, I can see columns, I can see the data types. A little more interesting than that is, I can see, so here's my base table for cart views. So people viewing a cart, and I can see like all of the different columns that are pulled in. And then I can see like event ID, I can see a human readable name for what that column is. Another common problem that I'm sure you've had, Stephen, is like, like you push a ton of data into a warehouse or whatever, it's getting pulled from various APIs on the internet. And you're just like sitting there, like doing all of this forensic and reverse engineering to figure out like, oh, this ID that comes in to my system, into my warehouse, where is it coming from? What is this thing? How does it, how does it match what's in BigCommerce? And
Yeah.
so, if nothing else, just the fact that like when you turn field on and you pipe it into a data warehouse, you have all the definitions of all the data that you're looking at. Like that right there just saves teams just hours and hours and hours.
I mean, yeah, like the amount of just documentation and just being able to identify what you're looking at, where you're looking at, and just having that be almost yeah, I mean, I guess technically it is real time. If updates were to happen, they would update it. So for if you were able to get something to work once when pulling that data, but the second time when trying to do some sort of reproducibility, you weren't able to pull it, you'd actually would be able to see real time where the documentation has changed and know where the error might lie.
Exactly. Yeah. So we pipe, and there's a whole bunch of different tools with like for unit testing and things like that are here as well. But like, yeah, so it's just really easy, right? So like, I'm a terrible developer, to be honest. Like personally, I have a team of people that are way smarter than me. But with DBT, it's like, you have autocomplete of your SQL queries, things like that. Like it just makes this stuff a lot easier to use. And then where it gets really exciting, and where I'm most excited to be partnering with BigCommerce on this stuff is, when we push this data to BigQuery, BigCommerce, and Shopify doesn't have this. This is one of those amazing kind of superpowers of BigCommerce that I don't think people totally understand just yet, or they're not taking advantage of, which is, BigCommerce has a native integration to we call it an ETL, an extract, transform, load tool, to pipe and replicate all of your BigCommerce data into BigQuery. It's absolutely phenomenal. Most people, if you're in the Shopify world and you want to do that, you got to use a dedicated tool like Fivetran for that work, or Stitch. Mm-hmm. And for kind of a mid-market store, Fivetran, Stitch, they're going to, just that integration into Shopify to pipe all that data, that can cost a couple $100 a month, depending on the size of your store, and, there is a Fivetran integration for BigCommerce, and it's really useful. We use it a lot if we're going to like pipe into Snowflake or Redshift or some other data warehousing tool. But BigQuery is awesome. And it's kind of our go-to at this point. And the fact that like I can just like flip a switch and turn on that integration with BigCommerce and not get charged to replicate that data, like that's awesome. That's just a superpower, And so what we can do is combine all of that first party data, all the click-through data on a website with all of that historical BigCommerce data. And that opens the door to just wild things in terms of data engineering and data science. So, in this store right here, we call this like flattening tables. So, if you've worked in a data warehouse, columns are cheap in a data warehouse. So, whereas like if you're building a database for an application, you really want it like highly performant. So, if you're using MySQL or Postgres, those are relational databases, and they perform better if you have relations between tables and you're really streamlining the data. Data warehouses are kind of the opposite concept. It's like, hey, this is an orders table. I don't need to link it to a customer table. I can just take all that customer data that's associated with the order and just pipe it in, and then just have one massive orders table that has everything in the world that I could possibly want to know about that order. And what's cool about flattening that data in a data warehouse is you can then drop a business intelligence tool on top of that flattened data, and analysts can work with all that data, and they don't have to like try to figure out how to do joins or lightweight SQL queries inside of a tool like Tableau or Google Looker or Google Data Studio. All the data is just prepped and ready to go for them. So, so this is kind of an example of that, and you kind of got to squint a little bit. Sorry about that, but like this is a flattened orders table for a subscription company that we work with. Mm-hmm. And you can see here's an order that came in. Here's the order ID. Here's the subtotal on that order. Here's the date that it came in. So it came in today. And this one's a little less interesting. Let me look at. There's a lot of orders kind of coming in today. First time orders. These guys must be. Oh yeah. So So here's So this here is the timestamp of the order. Sorry, this is a different table. This is another flattened table, but it's not showing historical data. But this here, right? This is a session. This is essentially. Let me grab another table. Cut that out in post.
It's all done in post.
It's all done in post. Sorry. Yeah. Here's this interesting table. Okay. So here's an order that came in on the 17th, and for $24. But I'm flattening out this order, so that lets me add on additional information. So one of the things I can do is I can say, well, how many orders has this person placed? What was the order count up until this order was placed? So this is their third order. And I can see, again, in the same table, I can see, well, when was their first order? Okay, how many days was this order, the current order, from their first order on the store? So this order came in 133 days after their first order. In this case, this guy right down here, this order for $30, this is their 5th order. And this, their first order was like over a year ago. It was 537 days ago. It's been 18 months since that first order. So again, like being able to like flatten all this stuff out, and I can see here, like, okay, well, this is their 5th order. Well, what was their first order? How did they come in, originally, and that's where I can see, oh, they came in from Google on a pay-per-click order here, so again, to be able to like, flatten all this stuff out and see first touch, last touch, build your own attribution models, which aren't really that hard to do. It's just a little bit of SQL query. And then to be able to combine that with all of this kind of enriched information that you have about a customer, it allows you to really go deep into your analytics in a way that you just can't with like Google Analytics, as a starting point.
Right.
And then from there, we partner really closely with another company called High Touch. So I'll go to their site. So High Touch, they're what's called a reverse ETL. And, they struggled the way that I struggle with the fact that like CDPs, reverse ETLs, like all these names are just absolutely terrible. And no marketer in the world knows what the heck us guys are talking about with all this stuff. But like a reverse ETL is essentially a platform for taking data in a data warehouse and sending it places to activate it. So we partner with them really closely, right? Because we grab all this data, we grab all this rich first-party data that you can't get any other way. We dump it into a data warehouse. We provide all these open source tools for being able to work with it. We actually work with some machine learning tools like Faraday to enrich the data even further with predictive analytics and things like that. And then you can just sit a tool like High Touch on top of that data, and suddenly now you can just like start using this data for like really, really precise personalization, targeting, lookalike audience, things like that. So, this is kind of the future of where all of this data stuff is going. We kind of refer to this as like the modern data stack. Mm-hmm. And as the company that helps BigCommerce companies collect all this data, we're just in this really interesting place to help them activate it. So if we've got a couple more minutes, one final thing I want to show you is how we are approaching analytics on top of this data. Again, all open source. Yeah. We use a tool to generate analytics called cube.dev. So I'll just go to so people can see the homepage here. So this is cube.dev. Cube.dev is another open source hosted product. What cube.dev does is, and this gets, for people who are struggling with the term like headless e-commerce, I'm going to like make it even harder. And I'm going to say, this is a headless BI solution. So essentially there's Cube and just only like 2 or 3 other companies have figured out that one of the next evolution in business intelligence tools is actually creating APIs for reporting tools. So most of the reporting tools that people have used traditionally sit just on top of a data warehouse, on top of a database directly. Mm-hmm. And all of that querying, we call it modeling, all of the modeling for your reports happens in that BI tool. And so as a result, like if you're at a company that uses 2 BI tools, like you've got a marketing team using Tableau, and you've got an engineering team using Metabase or Google Looker or something like that, right. Historically, they both kind of have to manage their SQL queries, their modeling separately. And so one thing that happens all the time and drives organizations absolutely bananas is, one team is looking at a report on orders over time and the value of orders over time, and they're getting one number, total order value. And another team is getting a different number for order value. And it's because their SQL queries are just slightly different. Like one of the teams is including taxes and another team is not, or somebody is including discounts and another team's not. So the idea here with headless BI, or the technical term for it is a semantic layer, mm-hmm. is that you define all of that business logic for your models in one place. And then that something like Cube serves up an API that has all those analytics, all those measurements and metrics and stuff like that. so that the BI tool that you're using can just be a lot more lightweight and less opinionated, and just kind of, and not do that heavy lifting, you know?
Right. Okay.
This comes in really handy too. Like, before I got into this stuff, I used Chartio a lot. Chartio was just a great lightweight BI solution, really great help text, stuff like that. Atlassian bought it and deprecated it, turned it off to the public. They're kind of wrapping it into some other tools. But as a result, like, not only do I got to recreate all the reports, I got to recreate all the models in a situation like that. But, if you're using something like a semantic layer, all the models stay the same. You can just kind of pick and choose whatever reporting front end tool you want. Or, and this is super cool, you can build your own. So this is kind of the playground for Cube. So Cube, it sits on top of all of our DBT models.
Mm-hmm.
And it pulls all that information in and essentially like creates an API. It does a whole lot of like incredible caching, performance optimization, so that like you can build, it's a very, very performant API. And then, this is their sandbox. This is just where they allow merchants to start building their own visualizations on top of that data, So this is querying that same data warehouse that we were looking at. And this is, what am I looking at here? This is looking at like first touch attribution for orders, so I can see where all these orders are coming in. I can start modeling it, playing with it. And then you can see here, these are all the charting libraries that you can use to interact with this data.
Okay.
And actually what's just mind blowing is they have this tool here where like you can create a chart in their playground, and then they just give you the React code, the JavaScript code you need to drop this into your own app. So again, what's amazing, especially as more and more BigCommerce companies are going headless and hiring engineers that know more advanced JavaScript, is that using Fueled and kind of all of our open source tools here, a team with 1 or 2 JavaScript developers, they could be mid-level developers, they could just be getting started with a lot of this JavaScript stuff, can actually build out all of the dashboards that their customers need, version control it, stuff it into other applications, internal apps. We have people that really love Notion as a team tool to be able to kind of share information. You can drop one of these, visualizations into a Notion doc. Like, it's kind of wild. Suddenly now, like, we say that we're really helping brands democratize all their data.
Right.
It's with these kind of open source tools, with, all this stuff here that, folks can start to, really kind of like own this data on their own, really trust it because like it's well documented. They can mess with it. They can build their own attribution models. They can activate it to answer their own questions. They can activate it in campaigns with things like high touch, stuff like that. So it's just like this whole new way of saying like, hey, I want more control. And Fueled, again, like, well, we're offering like fully hosted solutions. Like, we have brands that don't even know anything about this stuff, that never want to hear the word DBT, never want to hear the word semantic layer. They just want us to build them really nice reports, and we do that. But we have other people or agency partners that want more control here, and we can support them in a really interesting way as well.
That's fantastic. I mean, the idea of, taking a database and kind of essentially doing, the same thing that Headless has been transitioning, of saying, all right, we can take a powerful engine and put it into your back, like even going into further deeper of the back end of like, we can take beyond that to the data point, is just amazing. Like I honestly hadn't heard it until you just mentioned it. That's incredible. And
I mean, it's wild, man. Like DBT, I don't know what they're worth right now, but like DBT before this economic downturn, like in the middle of the pandemic, DBT was raising money on a $23 billion valuation with A16Z as their like lead investor. And you can, valuations are valuations. And obviously there's a lot of people out there that think valuations were way too high, last year, the year before. But like, DBT, Snowflake, Snowflake IPO'd at $63 billion, not more than a couple years ago. like data science and data engineering is just moving at this incredibly fast pace. And most e-commerce companies out there are years behind the curve on all this stuff, and that's our goal, is to say, okay, all of this stuff is happening around you. You could go and you could figure it all out yourself, or you could trust Fueled's point of view on how to start with this stuff. And, we just give you that leg up so that if you want to get into the modern data stack, you go with Fueled and you're there. You're there in a day, not 6 months, not hiring consultants, all that kind of stuff. Like, you and your agency partner, if you have one, are immediately doing advanced stuff the same week that you swipe a credit card with us.
Wow. Well, I mean, that sounds amazing and like a great place to close on. But
Yeah.
I would like to give you like a moment for any more like final thoughts. Maybe you talked about the future of, data relations and databases, especially when it comes to like what it would look like for e-commerce once it catches up. The idea of definitely streamlining data to create less overhead would be, amazing. So, that's incredibly cool. But yeah, I just wanted to give it to you for like any closing thoughts or anything that you might want to end on.
No, it's great. I'll just say, one of the things I love best about BigCommerce is that it's really prepping companies to be able to do this kind of stuff. And again, own their own journey. And I think that's really incredible. There are a lot of e-commerce platforms out there, and anybody who's watching this probably has already drank the Kool-Aid, like I have, like you have. Like,
yeah.
Just the fact that like BigCommerce is making it so easy for merchants to own their own source data with that integration with BigQuery that you have is absolutely incredible. And I think, when you start kind of coupling that with what we're doing, there's just, all those questions that people have struggled with and scratched their head and said, I don't know how to answer this question about my customers. You can now, and to me, that's just really cool. So if folks want to learn more about what we're doing, fueled.io, there's information there. There's links to our BigCommerce integration, stuff like that. There's a sign up form. Give me a shout. Love to do another demo with anybody who's interested in this. Love to kind of talk through more of the use cases in the BigCommerce space. And again, just really help people start using this data in interesting ways.
Great. I mean, that's so awesome. And Sean, it was such a privilege to have you here today to go over all of this. Yeah. So again, fuel.io, guys. Go check it out.
Thank you.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. I'll talk to you later.